Welcome to the Vision and Purpose podcast, where we dive deep into the lives of incredible people who have made a mark on the world. Join us as we explore the journeys, stories, and passions of individuals who have achieved extraordinary feats, shattered barriers, and inspired us all. And now your host, Dr. Sharon H. Porter. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another powerful episode of Vision and Purpose Podcast. This is where we dive deep into purpose-driven conversations, transformational truths, and real stories that push us to grow, lead, and live fully. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon H. Porter, and today's guest is more than just a therapist or coach. She realigns with individuals with themselves and their purpose. Whether you're a healthcare provider, a parent, or simply someone ready to commit to personal growth, she guides clients out of survival mode into a sustainable system of living. With a focus on ADHD, mood disorders, anxiety, and codependency at the core of many challenges, she uses a holistic approach, addressing mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness. Please welcome to the show a champion of preventative recovery and personal realignment, Miss Sara Wilder. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is certainly my pleasure. I am just so ready to dive in to your background. I first got to ask, what inspired you to describe your work as realigning people? Actually, and on your website, it says realigning people like a chiropractor aligns the spine. And I love that. What inspired you to describe your work that way?
I think a lot of it, at one point I was actually working with chiropractors and I was like, oh, this mind-body connection works well with the emotional stuff that I deal with. But I think it really comes from the belief system that most people are not too far away from their purpose, which is themselves. They've just been disconnected from, their work is on their mind more than it should be. Their stress, we just inherit stress. And I think a lot of that realignment comes with training people to know how to get back into their bodies and feel like they're living their own lives and just not in their heads all the time.
I really love that. In your experience, why do so many people get stuck in survival mode rather than stepping into that purpose-driven life?
I think there's a lot of different reasons, but I'm gonna give you I feel like my top three. One is we've not known any different. I see a big, not to start with the biggest one, but a societal disadvantage for everyone is that we don't really have a lot of education on how to deal with emotions, how to regulate, which kind of leads into the second one, which is we inherit stress. We inherit belief systems about who we are, what we're supposed to do, whether that be literally from your family or whether that be from the external world and society that we live in. I'll just speak for America because I'm not trying to come after many other countries' structural deficits, but I think it really is just, I think we've just not known how to build mental health and recovery into our lifestyle until there's this concept of it being too late. So I'm trying to be on a mission to try to reduce some of that.
You say that, and I'm thinking adults, right? But I'm an elementary principal by profession. And year after year, we see the mental health concern getting younger and younger and younger. I'm elementary, and even as young as 4 with pre-K students, we see that overwhelmness, that stress as a pre-K student, right? Do you service children or is it just adults?
So I focus on the provider, and that is a expansive term in itself. I see educators as the biggest, like, provider is it for sure, but parents are also a provider. So I personally just, and that's also because my professional track took me dealing with, since my background is in addictions, I was dealing with grown adults, but who were functionally like operating at an elementary psychosocial level. And I personally don't think kids are the issue, even a special needs child. I think how a provider handles stress to
Mm,
deal with a difficult situation is the bigger culprit of
mm.
what the youth is dealing with.
Wow, I love that lens. I really do, because it's definitely something that's causing, the need, and so I like the way you spoke that. So I'm gonna have to reconsider how we are approaching things because it's definitely becoming more challenging each year. Now, what are some of the most common signs that someone may be out of alignment with their true self?
So I think they vary between person, but I would say any kind of like when your body is showing you that, like, I would say body dissatisfaction is just one sign, which I feel like that qualifies everyone to be like, okay, we're disconnected. But reality is we are. Like, even myself as someone who's built this lifestyle is I'm never fully accepting of myself at any moment until I take that time. And I think that's been a big disqualifier. But I also think the bigger issue is like if you're having any kind of like physical health issue or, high blood pressure, those physical signs, there is a huge emotional component there, not only of how you manage stress, but how you interpret stress, which stress is actually helping you and showing you like, oh, I need to pause for a moment. But a lot of people, just individual stressors, they look different for everyone. But I would say definitely like chronic illness is the biggest stressor and the biggest sign of, I'm not even going to make it about weight because my whole brand is about, acceptance of, different size bodies because myself, I never fit into a number based in the health industry. But I would say underweight as well as overweight is one of those signs there's an emotional inflammation issue is what I call it.
I love that. Wow. Now, I've seen that several places that you actually mentioned that codependency is at the crux of many issues. Why is this such a central piece in mental health struggles?
It's a good question. Elementary school principals coming out with you know how to ask questions as an educator for sure. So the codependence is at the crux of it because codependence is what makes us humans and allows us to connect. When we talk about codependence in kind of the trendy term right now, I think we're speaking without the term of it being a imbalance of codependence. We as individuals, we need each other. Even the stress and the trouble individuals. We need each other to be able to coexist and actually grow as a society. But I think where we've gotten stuck as a larger group of just individuals is we've inherited so much of that over dependence on a parent or an under dependence on the lack of parenting. And that, I myself like was always my mom raised me to be independent and I became codependent in an unhealthy way because I was too independent. And I think that's a huge issue for a large group of the population. There are some like demographic identifiers, but we don't have to go into that. But there's also a codependent dynamic to people or parents who love their children. And if you're not teaching them how to be self-sustaining and independent to a certain degree, that overall contributes to the larger codependency issues, which is what people look outside of themselves to fix.
Wow, you give me things to think about, Sarah.
Yeah. Welcome to therapy with Sarah.
Like for real. Oh my goodness. So how do you blend therapy and coaching in your sessions to help clients say shift toward that long-term recovery and even prevention?
So I had to do it a little differently, and to be honest with you, I'm still kind of figuring it out and tweaking it. But one is I had to work on myself first. I was a practitioner that was there for everyone else, that was chasing the dollar and trying to make sure my student loans didn't drown me and trying to buy a house and quote unquote live the American dream. And I had to pause and I had to be like, why do I feel like I'm not good enough? Why do I feel like, what I'm saying to my clients, they don't do, the things I say? And I had to develop some inner workings of practicing what I preach before I kind of just left because before COVID, and COVID was the true identifier that I needed to be here. But I was out of here. I was like, I'm gonna go work in Europe where they really, like they could value me. But something told me to stay here, and that set me off on a journey of like, okay, I have all these great things. Why am I not connected with they feeling like enough? So that was the first thing is I had to embody what mental health looks like, which is what I asked my higher power. It's like, help me be a role model for mental health. And in that time of my own journey, I collected some perspectives that I formed a curriculum. And, I could have written a book, but as an ADHDer, you don't do anything small in an attention deficit world. So I saw some common denominators of not only like working with my substance addicted clients, but underneath that, once you get someone sober, there's this relationship with food that emotions tend to attach to. So I designed a curriculum that helps and then I also saw that trend in like people with anxiety. The first thing that we tend to lose control over that is fundamentally for how we rebuild is eating. And that is also its own process addiction, which is this whole other side of addiction studies that doesn't really get to be talked about unless you consider yourself an eating disorder specialist or, someone that niches down exactly because we're still kind of scared. We're still dealing with the stigma of like, oh, addiction doesn't affect us, but it really does. And so I developed this program to try to bridge that gap. Called Fresh Perspective about how you build the relationship with you through the relationship with food. That's my way of at least trying to bridge the gap of coaching and making therapy not only more accessible, but more relatable.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned weight a few times, and before we actually came on air, you talked about how you've been modeling now for a year and how you're actually using that as a part of this. And I absolutely think that's brilliant. Can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that and how that's working for you?
Yeah, my journey started with I was an athlete to kind of an average sense most of my life, but once I started going into adulthood and professional, I lost that. I lost myself. I became more in pursuit of like, my master's degree and my licensures and, let the adulting precede me. So I, focused on I wanted to be able to at any size because I see this with women who are more slender as well as women who are heavier. And for context, since we're virtual, I'm 6 feet tall, and my highest weight at one point was about 400 pounds. And so I've never fit the mold of like, oh, your BMI means you're morbidly obese. I'm still morbidly obese to this day after having released myself from 170 pounds naturally. Okay, so it clearly was not it was not me, but I wanted to be able to accept myself at any stage of life because I don't have kids yet. I know my body's going to change. My brain health was my perception of the world, as well as my belief system about who I was and what my worth was based off of what I looked like. And it was never about, like, yes, I know it's pretty. I got gifted in the genetic sense of like my dad was a model. So that helped, but he also was a blue collar entrepreneur. Like I was pretty, but I wasn't connected with it. So my journey was really about making sure that I could accept myself at any change, at any stressor. But modeling came to be that reinforcement. Like the gym, I got the gym down. I got it in my routine. It's not necessary for me to feel good, but it helps me feel good. Modeling is a different type of challenge because a lot of my worth came from what I know, my intellect. Modeling is about being truly yourself and as confident as you can be in the presence of whether it's a photographer. And I also wanted modeling to mean something. I didn't want to just take a picture. I wanted it to represent what I stand for. But it really requires a lot of that mind-body connection and really knowing yourself to be able to be out there and have a lot of people look at you. And I've not really gotten too many negative things to say, but I don't, they could be coming, but how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to make sure you maintain your character intentionally and authentically, even when people are in the face of tearing you down?
Wow.
So,
That's amazing. First of all, I applaud you for losing the pounds naturally. Because I
thank you.
know that could not have been easy to do it. It had to take some discipline
It
and
didn't
some
help that I was
consistency.
stubborn.
I love that. I love that as
Yeah.
I'm in my challenge of life right now. I just applaud you for that. And then to take it a step further, and begin modeling. And because I know modeling is more than just a pretty face. And so to really
So much
step
more.
up and
That
so
was a
much more,
rude,
right?
rude surprise,
Right.
honestly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so to take on that, and to help with this whole mindfulness and loving who you are, every inch of you, is beautiful. And I'm sure that you are doing good, in this, doing some really good for people who need that. So
I'm
thank you for
hoping.
that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think a lot of it was representation. I never had a whole lot of people that looked like me.
Hmm.
Being a tall woman, and I didn't. If I had grown up in the South, I probably wouldn't have been who like. But there's not a lot of, and I'm gonna say this with sensitivity is there's not a lot of white women in the modeling industry. So I
Mm,
didn't have a whole lot of representation to like, oh, I can do this. And it
mm,
was slow. But when I got there, I was like, oh, wow, this is like the sisterhood of, or in the brotherhood of, when
hmm.
you're in modeling is there.
Yes.
And I think modeling for me, I was just kind of pursuing, having lost my father at a young age and just trying to understand like why did he want to model? And I think a lot of it now that I
Wow.
see with my own intention is the representation of being a bigger bodied woman.
Wow.
And there being other women on the sidelines that need to, if you may not be a model, that's fine, but being able to be yourself and deal with the resistance,
Yes.
that's what I want modeling to be for me.
I love it. Now, you take a holistic approach, which includes, of course, emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental perspectives. Why is this multidimensional view so critical for lasting healing?
I think it's really important because hopefully this will land well. I'm gonna try. My professional background has gone through systems where the what we don't really honestly consider luxuries in our life of just going to get a pedicure or a massage. I have worked with people who don't have that luxury. My background's actually in the prison system and working and coming through court systems and community mental health, where I think what is missing from what mental health looks like for, a well-off person or a stable person has to look different, but it has to be based in the reality that if the electric grid goes out, if all your self-care is dependent on electricity working and your dollar to go far, then we're not in a mentally well state. We're in a delusion at that point. And so I stand firm and sometimes stubborn, and I will die on the hill of we need to understand how breath work will regulate hormones. We need to understand how food is emotionally attached to us, and we have to be able to be versatile in how we attend to our own emotional needs and not be dependent on someone else providing that for us.
Wow. Wow, it really is a multidimensional, it's necessary to not just tackle one part of that. And that's what you just explained, that is necessary to look at the whole person,
Yeah.
for that holistic
Absolutely,
approach.
because you're not just an elementary school educator.
Right.
You're a host and a
Yeah.
visionary for, and a creative. I can tell if you've got a magazine
Mm-hmm.
that, we're multi intersectional beings, and
Yes.
that is sometimes it's a blessing and a curse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie. Emotions are also a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
But if you have and you can build the systems of thinking and as well as feeling and be able to build trust with yourself, like you can hold space for being multidimensional.
Yes. I love that. Love it. Now, you mentioned the providers that you actually work a lot with, healthcare workers, parents, caregivers. Why is self-alignment so important for these groups in particularly?
Because our whole profession is about other people, and that is where that codependency becomes imbalanced. And I will say, and I don't have a statistic for you because I don't operate fully on numbers, but if you look at the patterns of most people who end up, and I'll just say in the therapeutic space of the emotional therapist, they're usually seeking out helping others because no one helped them. And that is amazing. We need people like that. But burnout is when you don't have a protection for that kind of spirit. And people, they go into professions for different reasons, but providers, you're chronically taking care of other people, which distorts our reality just from one shift, let alone hopefully this tracks too, let alone looking at the imbalance of like having to go to school and learn and input information and burden your brain, which is great, you're smart, but if you don't actually have the energy to apply that, you're not going to be able to sustain in any profession. I don't care if you work in sales or if you work in healthcare, you have to have a balance of input of information to output of experience.
So true. I love
So I
it.
tend to see a lot of providers, they get stuck in that because we all have a passion to, I'm service oriented and I was the worst culprit. And that's why I'm here talking about myself. If anyone else takes it personally, I did not say you. But I'm there for everyone else. In order for me
Mhm.
to be there for everyone else long term, I had to prioritize myself and become self focused and then I unlocked an obscene amount of energy. I can't,
Oh,
once you start getting healthier, it's like, oh my gosh, I gotta do something with the energy. And so I had to create my business. I had to
mhm.
create, a vision for people to be able to, fill in the gaps of what they deal with.
Wow. Wow. I love it. And I hope, audience, that you caught that. It doesn't matter the profession, your background. This really speaks to all. It really does. You do have to self focus. I love that, Sarah. I
Yeah.
really do. Now, you believe that no diagnosis has to be lifelong if addressed properly. Can you elaborate on this perspective?
Yeah, I think I can probably use a metaphor best to portray that is, if you're out having a good time and you trip off the last step and you break your leg will never be the same, but it will not stay broken forever. And the brain is the same concept. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's not. Is that the brain and honestly the body is a self-regenerative entity. So really the biggest issue with people healing and getting stuck at the diagnosis state is not doing that deep belief system work of challenging your own beliefs about your capabilities, developing the concept of self-efficacy, and I'm not here to push anyone through a certain time period of how you do that, but I'm gonna put my foot down in saying that there is, and it's kind of unmeasurable. There's really no screening that we have that depicts like what does a person believe in themselves. But I do think it's a missing component that a lot of the mental health information that we're exposed to these days is still going to become complicated in application if you do not have a someone who can help you hold the space until you can hold it yourself about how you work through those belief systems because they can be quite convincing.
Absolutely. Wow. Now, what small steps, because I love takeaways. I love when the guests can give some takeaways. What small but meaningful ways or steps that our audience can start today to begin their own realignment and wellness journey?
It's going to be different for everyone, but this is my number one go-to that I help my clients is the getting used to a small amount of peace. I know it's going to
Mm,
build. Hold on. And what I mean by that is, so I did a lot of
mm,
this in my car as I was driving. I was born and raised in New England. Aggressive driving is our MO in the northeastern area, okay? So I want to say I was road rage to the point where, we see it on the news, but just the frustration I felt in my car and being able to calm myself from that because I'm not going to get out of the car and instigate nothing. Like, so I started building these mindful moments, or these moments of peace where I could feel the emotion and then recalibrate myself. Doing that, so an additional takeaway would be a 5 4 3 2 1 technique, is using, car is one of my favorite metaphors of like the mind as well as the human body, but we probably don't have enough time to go into that today. But it is practicing that decompression and emotional awareness at the time where you're kind of in a safe space, especially when you're in traffic. If you live in the Triangle area, this is best to do as you're leaving work, and just training your brain like, oh, no, we're safe. Because stress is unavoidable, and some of it we actually need. But do you have a baseline out? My whole program has got those mindful moments built in to like work up and just talk to, we get worked up and then we have to like have that moment of peace.
Wow. First of all, that actually centered me. Just it really did, because I think and as I mentioned, something you can do today, that's actually something everyone can do right now as you're listening to this. I love that, because I don't think we always think about going to peace in the midst of chaos, in the midst of the busyness of it all. But centering yourself in peace. I love that. I love it. I love it.
It takes a lot of practice, but if you do it in a place where, now if you got kids in the car, that's even better of a challenge.
Right,
But
exactly.
thankfully, like that's where I really started. Like I was like, yo, I'm a busy professional. I can't go to therapy. These are all the like things that kept me not doing it. But I had to find and build it into what I was doing. And
Yes.
driving is one of those places that I'm pretty sure we all do it. Or if you take public transportation, practicing the 5 4 3 2 1 and being able to feel the difference of like, oh, you can feel someone sitting next to you versus being like, okay, they're there next to me.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Sarah Wilder. I want to thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and offering such a refreshing and hopeful approach to mental health and recovery. And again, I just love about getting to peace. That part of it all has just really taken me to a place of peace. So I thank you for that. And hopefully everyone can realize of themselves with their purpose and their strengths. But before we end, you have to share, how can our audience connect with you? How can they follow you? And how can they reach out should they need your service?
Yeah, absolutely. So Googling me would help a lot. Sara without the H, Wilder, Wilder. You'll find my website. It's sarawilderlcsw.com. I have a lot of, free, I have a blog there, so it's a free resource. My YouTube channel is Perspective Counseling. All of that is linked on my website. If you want to follow me on socials, my professional page is rightsize_perspective. And then if you want to follow me on my modeling journey, swilder123.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Oh my gosh. So for those of you who are out there and you are feeling stuck or even burnt out, especially our providers and caregivers, know that you can begin shifting today. Start with self-awareness, honest inventory, and small daily actions. And of course, reach out to Sara Wilder, who will, I'm sure, get you where you need to be. Again, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you for being my guest for this episode, Ms. Wilder.
I was a privilege and an honor. I love talking about my craft, but I also love talking with people who want to understand it and help other people. So thank you.
I love it. To our viewers and our listeners, we thank you for joining us on this journey to explore the depths of Sara's vision and purpose. And your vision is the compass guiding you through life, and your purpose is the fuel that propels you forward. Keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep pursuing your purpose. Every step you take brings you closer to the fulfillment of that purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon H. Porter, and until next time, live life with vision and purpose. Thank you for joining another episode of Vision and Purpose Podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe. Please join us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time.